Now it's doing it. That was weird. That's not what I wanted.
Yeah, we're on YouTube.
We are live on YouTube. I have not started the Zoom yet. So
Okay.
hello everybody early on YouTube. I thought I had this thing set to there we go. Now I've tweeted that out. So you see how the sausage is made here, folks. Let's go. All right. Hello there, and welcome to the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast here on hawkfanatic.com. A little hiccup there early on, trying to get everything going, all the machines going in the same direction at the same time. And I think we've done that now. I'm your host, Rob Howe, joined as always by Scott Docterman from The Athletic. It's Thursday, October the 6th, 9:22 a.m. Central Time. And I've been up for a while, had to see if I had a fatty liver this morning over at UIHC. I've been told my liver is not fat, so that's good. It's about the only thing on me that isn't. So I'll take it, Scott.
Well, I haven't had my liver checked recently, but I'd imagine I'm in the same boat on that. You've tried to lose, but yeah, the liver part of things that went from our 20s, now we start to worry about it now that we're old dudes.
Yeah, no question. And my diet's not the best, and I've tried to do better at that the last, I don't know, 6 months or something. The hardest thing for me is the winter months. I like to walk. I'm not an exercise inside guy, like an, treadmill, things like that. If I exercise, I like to walk or jog outside. And once it gets obviously freezing cold here, I can't do that. And sometimes I lapse. So going to try to not do that this winter.
I I get in spurts where I'll go a lot, and then for whatever reason I was really doing well. Then COVID hit, you couldn't go to your workout facility, and then afterwards there was I'm like, I'm not working out with a mask on. That's just really I'm not going to suffocate here, and then I got just really lazy. I gained some weight, even more than I had, and that sucked. And so now I'm kind of I'm losing weight, but I'm not really doing very well on keeping up with the exercise. So I can only imagine what the winter is going to be like. I'll go like I'll probably go tomorrow, since Friday morning and afternoon is about the closest to an off day as we have here. And then I'll probably go tomorrow, and then hopefully I go another time next week. That's my goal.
Yeah, I look forward to Fridays this time of year. You're right. I mean, it's the one kind of downtime we have. I go out and shoot high school football on Friday nights, but I kind of just catch my breath. I try to anyway on Friday mornings and Friday afternoons. And then this week we have another different type of assignment in terms of a night game on the road at Illinois. So that kind of changes your Saturdays around a little bit. And if you decide to come back after the game, which I think we're going to do, it's a middle of the night return to Iowa, and that screws your Sunday up, because then I could get home, Scott, at 2 or 3 in the morning, and I'm still going to be up by 7:30. So then the process is getting to the couch in the afternoon, putting the NFL on, and falling asleep.
Yeah, right. That's the worst part. That's why I've really over the years really struggled. I think that's because of having kids and just that time of day. Even now for
Yeah.
me, I can't. I wake up about 6:30 or 7 every single day, and no matter if it's after lightning delayed home
Yeah.
game for 7 hours, or I'm in bed by 10. It's about the same thing. So that's this week having that 6:30 game, and really, other than Wisconsin, I think this is probably the easiest drive in the Big Ten, just because other than the orange cones that pop up between here
Yeah.
and Champaign, it's generally a pretty easy drive. And it's 4 hours, maybe less, 3:45, depending on how many times it stopped. And but the 6:30 kickoff getting out of there. In your case, you probably get out of there, probably 11 or so. And
Yeah, if I'm lucky.
yeah, and in my case, it'll probably be 1:30. I'm actually going to stay in Bloomington. So that way,
That's smart.
yeah, that way I'm hitting the road, kind of using that adrenaline for 45 minutes or so. And then, okay, then let's not stress it out. And,
Yeah, we'll get into that Illinois game here in a little bit. We're gonna start off with a look back at Michigan. We're 5 days removed here, so we're not gonna dwell too much on that. Just kind of hit some of the key points of that game. I think, and I've rewatched the game. I did it in the Big Ten Network in 60, and enjoy those replays. They help a lot. But I guess kind of what I've thought about this week and kind of what I've tried to analyze, because it's really hard to know if Iowa's fourth quarter offense is a sign that things are getting better in the context of what, less than 100 yards through three quarters. What was Michigan doing defensively? Not wanting to give up the big play to let Iowa back in the game with a big, a deep shot or something like that, kept everything in front of them. So I would say I'm cautiously optimistic, Scott, but I'm not putting a whole lot of stock in that fourth quarter. I think I saw some things throughout the game that gave me some hope, just some different play calls, some different, and we could talk about the officiating too, that wiped out a couple of Iowa's better offensive plays, but we'll see. I mean, we'll get an idea this week right away with Illinois, whether or not those gains were real or Memorex for old
yeah,
dudes that are listening to the podcast.
live or Memorex. Yeah, I think we can figure out which is live and which is Memorex these days. But no, I'm there with you. I thought that what I saw in the late parts of the third quarter through the fourth quarter was at least they were executing, and there were three quality drives. The one in the middle got stranded at the 5-yard line, and we could, if we want, we don't really have to break down why it stalled there, but it did. But so that kind of gave me a little more pause. I think the last one was complete garbage as far as time goes. They were in prevent. But I think the other two showed us something. I think that some of the routes and the concepts that they were using in the first half, and not the first drive, there was a 3 and out, but the second, they only had two other drives in the first half. I thought that they were well put together, and I think that the second drive of the game was on quarterback. That was his worst drive. I thought he played well otherwise, other than that. And then I think the third drive was penalty related. Some really inexplicable calls. And so overall, when it comes to the offensive side of things, I came away with it like, okay, I've seen some strides. I'm not saying they're good. I'm not even saying they're average, but I've seen strides because they were on the bottom of the bottom, for so long, for the first, 2 games for sure. Defensively, I think what we saw is a better offensive line pounded a better defensive line, good defensive line. So Michigan is a better team than Iowa. No, there's no question in my mind. And I think that's what you kind of have to come to, that acceptance that Michigan's better, that when good teams come to Kinnick, and why Iowa has had so much success against them really comes down to those teams making mistakes or Iowa forcing them into mistakes, turnovers, penalties, stupid 3 and outs, stuff like that, bad punts. Nothing happened for Michigan that way. They executed at a very high level. Their quarterback was efficient. He didn't do anything stupid. They only had one really misstep, and that was Dante Craig's strip sack or blow up sack of JJ McCarthy. So I came away with it like, okay, the number 4 team in the country beat Iowa by 13. It was a decisive 13, but it shows you how far you are from the top. But I don't think it wasn't like they beat them 50-14. I thought that they made Michigan earn it, and Michigan earned it. They went 4, 5, 6 yards a pop at a time on rushing the ball. The quarterback was efficient. there were only, the only real two big plays I thought in the game, and one of them was that Corum one when they were stacked up, trying to stop the run late in the game. So I didn't come away discouraged by Iowa. In fact, I probably was a little more encouraged by the offense.
Yeah, we'll talk about it more in a few minutes when we preview Illinois. But again, we'll get an idea with Illinois is not Michigan. So if Iowa did make some gains last week, we should be able to see them against the Illini. But I agree with you, Scott. Michigan's offensive line was the story of this game. When that first drive, when they were blowing Iowa off the ball, and Corum was 2-3 yards down the field before he was even touched. That was like, uh-oh. And Michigan saw that they had that advantage early in the game. And I don't know if the game plan was to not put McCarthy in harm's way coming in. I think they probably had some plays that were a little bit more risky down the field. They didn't throw the ball down the field in this game because they didn't have to. But that was a really good game plan by Michigan once it figured out, okay, we've got an advantage here with our offensive line. Let's just roll them out, short passes, run the ball a lot. And it was a good game plan. And once they got up on Iowa, Iowa's offense is not in a place where it can win football games. And I think Michigan's defense is good, not as good as last year, but Iowa's offense just isn't good enough to beat a decent defense.
Oh, real question. And I think you summed up the game very well. And that is, when they were on that first drive, I think they were only in 1 third down situation. And because of the way they ran the ball and got in, used the chains, they scored a touchdown. They were physical. And I think it shows some of the deficiencies. And this is one thing with Iowa when they have guys who don't fit the prototype and they go against blue blood types who, the 4 stars, they've got the perfect size, perfect depth. What Iowa's mantra all these years is, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. Well, when talent works hard, you see the difference that shows up,
yeah.
A couple inches here and the reach, the physicality. And I think we saw that probably up front, that Iowa just, I don't want to knock Noah Shannon, he's 6 foot, 290 pounds, but he's going up against true NFL caliber linemen. It wasn't the best matchup for Iowa. Joe Evans, kind of the same thing. I thought Iowa played hard and they were very physical, but they got beaten by a better team. And I know there's been an obscene amount of aggravation by a lot of fans over this. And I'm like, they were number 4 for a reason. And they did nothing to me to say that they deserved a drop or whatever. Get them, and we're going to see what we can do with this much maligned and rightly so West Division.
My internet connection is unstable, I'm being told, Scott. Shocker.
Yeah, shocker for.
Sorry about that, folks.
Well, let's see here, Rob. So what do we think about Illinois then? I mean, how's this going to shake out?
You and I talked about this, and we'll get to this. Well, here's another tease. We're going to talk a little basketball media day later on, but we were talking at basketball media day yesterday, and you and I seem to be in agreement here. I'm not saying it's exactly like when Minnesota got a lot of hype after winning at Michigan State, but you and I talked about that after that happened. About, yes, good win, give Minnesota credit. You win on the road in the Big Ten against a decent program. You deserve that credit. But it's not Michigan State from last year. This is not Wisconsin from last year when it comes to Illinois winning at Wisconsin. Again, give Illinois credit for going on the road and winning that game and holding Wisconsin to 2 rushing yards. That's the one that pops out the most, I think, when you're looking at a statistics. But you and I both rewatched that game. 34-10, probably not that lopsided, closer game than that. It got away from Wisconsin in the second half. And Wisconsin's quarterback play is atrocious right now. Some parallels to Iowa when it comes to offense, no question about that. And I'm not saying that Illinois won't win this game. I think this is a toss-up game. I kind of like how this sets up for Iowa. Before we get into the X's and O's, just from a perspective of, I think Iowa's going to be salty after last week and not playing as well as it could have against Michigan at home. And I think Illinois, I think it's a natural letdown spot for them after going on the road and winning such a big game at Brett Bielema's former employee. All those things play into this. I just think if Iowa can get this into the fourth quarter, which I think it will, I think it's a better team, but that's just me.
No, I look at this game in a couple of different veins. I think that I'm in agreement with you about Wisconsin, Illinois. I've watched it like twice just to kind of see, wow, what did they do to shut down Wisconsin? And I looked at it as Wisconsin did a lot to shut down Wisconsin. There were a lot of penalties that got called back. They got behind the chains. They didn't throw the ball, obviously, really well. 2 interceptions. They were barely over 50%. And, Braylon Allen didn't, play very much. I mean, he only carried the ball 8 times for 2 yards. And, the sacks figured into that total as well, just kind of like it did with Iowa's. But there were things that translate well with Illinois. I mean, I think it runs the ball really well, and it stacked the line of scrimmage, which is what Iowa's going to have to expect from Illinois this week. And I think but it became kind of a snowball effect. There were some bad plays that turned into really good Illinois plays, and later in the later stages of the game, it just got progressively worse for Wisconsin. You've seen them press, which is part of the reason why that they pulled off one of the more shocking coaching firings I've ever seen with Paul Chryst. That was something I did not expect at all. I mean, I thought maybe they get to the end of the season, and if they were like 6-6 or even 5-7, that maybe they'd have some sort of a ultimatum, or maybe they would just say, okay, we got to do better. Maybe it's because Wisconsin and Iowa are so alike, and I just can't envision anything like that happening in Iowa, that I'm like, oh, won't ever happen there with Barry and their connections, and Paul Chryst is a grad and he coached there for such a long time. But
they had I think the dynamic of having the coach in waiting, or a coach that could be considered in waiting, kind of played it into. But I'm with you. I was stunned when that news crossed my timeline.
Yeah. But then I look at the rationale for it, and if you see them that they have been trending down for a couple of years, since really 19. Now granted, trending downward is 15-10, but it's not a very happy place right now. I think you look at what happened the other day, getting pulverized by Brett. That's something that the fans, the donors, they hate Brett Bielema. That's like Steve Alford coming to Iowa like a year or two later and beating Iowa by take your pick, 30 points in the arena. And the fact that they only rushed for 2 yards, their defense played horribly. So it's kind of ironic in some way that, you're going to elevate your defensive coordinator, who probably had one of their worst defensive performances I've seen, or at least back to back, because they did the same thing against Ohio State. They gave up 50 some odd points. But, so I'm not impressed at all with Wisconsin. And I think Illinois is playing really well, but I don't look at Illinois and say, oh man, that's a team that's just going to go out and dominate Iowa. I think, if anything, that they're going to be high on emotion. There's going to be a good crowd. They still have tickets because they're having like a family 4-pack for $109. Can you imagine that, selling 4 Iowa tickets for $109? The free tickets for students, so they're trying to pack it up, get it all orange in there. And Iowa just has the type of team that, okay, well, let's see what we got. And even if they aren't real great on offense, they can be very efficient and not do big, stupid things. And I think Illinois is capable of doing those.
Yeah, and the Iowa players, I mean, early in this week are aware of what and when I say Iowa players, I mean the guys on offense. They know what Illinois is going to do. And that's, as you said, stack the box, run blitz a lot. And that should open up opportunities for Iowa on offense if it can take advantage of those. If it catches the run blitz in the right at the right time and is prepared and handles it, that can be big plays. And that's something that this Iowa offense hasn't really had this year, but the potential is there if it plays well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you've got 8 or 9 guys within 3 to 4 yards of the line of scrimmage, and you block it correctly, and somebody has a mistake, especially a second level player, yeah, you can get LaShawn Williams or Caleb Johnson out in space, and they can hit a 40-yard gain or something like that. I think that is certainly capable in this game, and it probably will happen a couple of times because I do think I'm seeing some progress up front. It's not a good offensive line yet. I'm not going to kid it and try to paint this as something like, oh wow, check out this new improved offensive line. But you can see it incremental. You can see it. Okay, they're reaching their blocks a little bit better on the zone. They're coming at it with better angles on the counter. They played a really good defense last week, and I thought they ran the ball effectively at times, and I think that's kind of the same thing here, that Illinois has done a really good job. They're the nation's leading scoring defense, but you also have to take a look at who they've played. They lost to Indiana. Let's not forget that either. I mean, Indiana's not a record, some sort of great team. They got crushed at Nebraska. They played Wyoming, who's not very good. They played Chattanooga, blew them out. And then they played, Wisconsin, who's just, this is not a normal Wisconsin team. So I think overall, you've got to take those numbers, kind of like with Iowa too, for that matter, and say, you know what, they're a product of who they've played. Doesn't mean that they're not good, but it doesn't mean that this isn't November football and they're putting those numbers up.
Yeah. And I think, when teams are built the way Iowa and Illinois are, it comes down often to line play. And can Iowa's offensive line handle all of those guys in the box, the run blitzes, really good defensive tackles for Illinois, really good defensive tackles for Illinois. And then conversely, can Iowa's defensive line do a better job? Illinois' offensive line isn't as good as Michigan. There's no way, but it's still pretty good. And there's still a bowling ball running back who wears number 2 that's going to be coming through there. And you can't arm tackle. You can't, try to pursue from the side or behind on running backs like that, because they will just break through and get to that next level. So those to me are where the challenges are. And then obviously, I mean, Spencer's still missing throws that he's got to make. I don't know. Does that click in at some point? Does he have a game where he just hits those passes? Because if you look at DeVito on the other side, he's hitting almost 70% of his passes. And a lot of it are those short throws and getting it to Isaiah Williams where it's in space and he can make somebody miss. Whereas Spencer's not getting the ball to Arlen Bruce in space where he can make guys miss. To me, there are some differences there.
And that in some ways is conceptual too. And that's something that Iowa does need to adjust a little bit. I mean, it was hard early in the season when they were Arlen Bruce was the only receiver whose school's being paid for, was out there. And now you've got other guys, Nico Reganey and Brody Brecht in particular. I think I've seen some growth from Spencer, or at least more chemistry, and probably that's because Reganey's out on the field, but he's completed 64% in the last 2 games, which I think is a good number for him. It's a better than his career average, certainly. And the one that I think everybody went when he missed Lachey down the seam. I mean, he was wide open, and you've got to hit those. I mean, there's just no other way about it. I mean, and then I think he got into his head, and then he overthrew Brecht. And then he had one other bad throw where he almost got intercepted. But really, that's the only 3 that kind of stood out for me last week. I know in like week 1, there were like 8 or 9 that went, oh my God, you got to do something here. But he's going to have a lot of one-on-one opportunities. And one thing I do see with Illinois is I don't know that they have the players at linebacker or safety who can match up down in, down out with Laporta and Lachey. I think tight end could be a really key focus for Iowa in this game. So if Iowa can continue to do what it did last week, I think it's got a good chance. And yeah, he's going to have to be efficient. And when the opportunity is there, he's going to have to hit it. But they're going to give you those opportunities. It's just a matter of whether the line keeps up. And I think other than that one series late in the fourth quarter where he got sacked a couple of times. Other than that, I thought they pass blocked well, and they're just going to have to continue to do that on Saturday.
I asked Arland on Tuesday if, because he established himself early this season as one of the dudes, along with Laporta. Now Lachey's kind of emerged, and Reguilini's come back, and they've got more weapons now to use. But I asked Arlen if defenses are playing him differently, and he goes, "Yeah." He goes, "I'm the motion guy, and at the beginning of the year, I'd get handed off. The defenses would just he'd come in motion, and they'd hand off to whoever was the opposite side defender. Now they're following him, they're shadowing him wherever he goes. They're trying to take him away, and he's got to counter that. And Iowa has to come up with ways to free him up." Now that defenses have countered what Iowa was trying to do with him. So be interesting to see this week if they're able to adjust.
Yeah, that's a big key, Rob. You hit it there. I went through an analytic breakdown of this team, from that kind of perspective. And one thing I've noticed is when they do use jet motion, they are pretty effective overall. Whether or not they get the ball, it doesn't really matter. I would say when you look at and let me kind of get there. I mean, people looked at the headline and I kind of freaked out that they're growing and making progress. I went, "Oh no, that's not what I wrote about." But when they are, let's take a couple different aspects here. When they throw on first down, they're actually pretty good. That they're completing 71% of their passes when they throw on first down.
How often are they throwing on first down?
About 34 to 35%.
Okay.
So that's a pretty good number, and that's consistent. And I think that's something that, again, teams aren't ready for. They're ready for Iowa to run on first down. They don't believe in their wide receivers. So you can take gifts. You can get, good passes and stuff.
Now you see that with other teams too, when they you throw a 4 or 5 yard pass, that's as good as 4 or 5 yards on the run on first down.
Exactly. It's staying ahead of the chains.
Yep.
If it's like if you run the ball for 4 yards or 5 yards and pass the ball for 4 or 5, it's staying in ground acquisition. Now, their problem is because of who they are, and I think in some ways the analytics are a little bit screwed because of or skewed, I should say, based on screwed based on the first 2 games. Yeah, is that when they run on first down, they're not very good. They're 122nd and 126th in yards per carry at less than 3 yards. And when they are in second down, that's where they get in real trouble because their options aren't real good at that point. If they have less than 2nd and 5, they've never thrown once. But if it's more than 2nd and 5, they throw almost all the time. And then if out of the 60 second down plays following a first down run, Iowa ran 56.7% with an average distance of 5.8 yards per carry. They averaged 3.5 yards per carry on those plays. That's not bad. That's actually staying ahead of the chains, and you're getting 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3, and they're makeable territory where you can still use a full service offense. You can run the ball 3rd and 2 and 3rd and 3, or you can pass it, of course. But if they fail to gain more than a yard, they throw all the time, and then they are averaging only 4 dropbacks. In fact, out of their 22 passes, they've been also sacked 3 times and scrambled once. But out of they average only 4 yards when it's like 2nd and 9 and 3.3, and they've only got out of those 26 plays 5 first downs out of them. So they're really just when they're at 2nd and 9, they're going to throw, and they usually throw incomplete. That's really and that's where they get in real trouble. So that is something that the staff needs to realize. And I think, I don't know how much they did. That's why I asked Kirk about, their analytics and their meetings and what they talk about. He said wouldn't go into specifics, but he did say that was part of the discussion. And then also you look at they don't involve their quarterback in a lot of those discussions. And I don't know if they should or it doesn't matter. But I thought that was kind of interesting. And Spencer's just like, yeah, that's the minds to figure that out. So, but they gotta understand that they've got to look at those numbers and say, hey, if it's 2nd and 4, maybe we throw. Maybe they won't expect it. That to me, that's the part of coordination that they really need to emphasize going forward.
Yeah, we've talked about that for years, Scott, the predictability of Iowa's offense. And, when you're, I don't want to say basic, but, you're not a very exotic offense, and you rely on execution fundamentals and maybe not a wide array of plays. You need to be a little bit deceptive, and you need to be unpredictable. And Iowa just seems to settle into patterns that they have a trouble getting out of.
Yeah, for sure. And you brought up at the beginning of this little part of the discussion about the jet sweeps, and they've only ran 2 jet sweeps this year, one in each of the first 2 games, but it's still a very effective part of their game when they do that. When they run jet sweep, they're averaging 10.5 yards per carry just with the motion. Doesn't even have to be a carry. And then they've completed 5 to 6 passes. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really good, in fact. So, the one aspect that it does, and I wish they would do it more, because in 2020 they did do that, and they averaged through the whole season 7.1 yards per carry. Now, when you have somebody as electrifying as Amir Smith-Marset, or even Tyrone Tracy running in that play, that's going to get you some more yards. But I think what it's showing is people are following. You can see the coverage and what it is, and it also helps your offensive line, because that misdirection creates doubt and uncertainty among second-level players. And so, they go one direction and their eyes are this way, and then that can enable your offensive line just to get to them a little bit quicker. And you're not relying as much on cut blocks, which, of course, as we saw last week, could be disastrous even if you do it correctly.
Yeah, no question. And there were some, the game was still, early when those calls were made on that drive. And I wonder, if Iowa can even get down and get 3 points there, if it changes the complexion of that game at all. Probably not. As you said earlier, Michigan was the better team, and Michigan played better, played pretty clean football. So I don't think that those calls change the outcome of the game, but it's just, it's disheartening when you're an offense that struggles as much as Iowa struggled, and then you're still trying to overcome questionable calls. It makes it that much more difficult, and it's tough. I mean, you want to say just flush those plays and move on. You can't think about it. It's out of your control, but just human nature. You're like, God, we ran, Caleb Johnson rips off this run and it doesn't count. And you only get so many opportunities to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And, the penalty aspect, to me, I think it's more partly existential, with it comes the cut blocking that gets called as a clipping penalty, or a tripping penalty, I guess it was, which is ridiculous.
Was it clipping or tripping? What did they call that?
I thought it was, it should have been clipping if you're going to call anything, but instead they called tripping. And frankly, should have been nothing. It was a perfectly executed cut block. He went to the far side knee. He drove through it. He never kicked his legs up or anything. And so it's just a ridiculous call. And that needs to be heavily discussed. And then, of course, blocking during the whistle and pancaking somebody is not unnecessary roughness. It's called football. And that does need to have, they need to have that be discussed at the Big Ten level, because you just can't have that, not in a physical league like this. So, but either way, I think I look at, those penalties are, the second one they were able to overcome. The first one they weren't. And that's really tough, especially when, it's a 15-yard penalty that just crushed them, their drive, and they were doing so well. And it's
Was
like,
that before or after the hold on Dunker?
I think it was after. And
Okay.
I
Was that
think,
a whole? I don't remember if I went back and watched that because I know that Kirk was complaining about the holding call too.
yeah, there was the holding call, and in that one, um, you know, I think I remember looking at it, and it was, semi. It's hard to determine, and
Mhm.
so I'll give the officials the benefit of the doubt on that. But the 15 one. Um, wait a minute, that was
It was the same drive, weren't they back to back plays?
yeah. Let's see here. They were
If not,
no,
they were close because it seemed like
close, close.
Iowa was got pushed back twice.
Yeah, yeah. It was within 4 plays. It was the same drive because you had Caleb Johnson running, and then Dunker got a holding, and it was first and 20. Then they picked up a first down, and then on first and 10 from the 46 was when they had the outside zone, and then you had the clipping call on the backside to Connor Colby, and again that just takes the life out of your offense. It takes the life out of your team when you're doing so. And then if it's a legit penalty, so be it. That's the way the game's played. But when it's not, I'm not saying that they need to. I don't want to have any challenge flags on penalties, or at least like that. Man, that was a bad call, and it's not even subjective. It's not even the point of semi being subjective. It was just a bad call, and so that killed them on that drive, and that was in the first half. And at that stage, I think it was 10-0. So Iowa gets back in the game. I mean, if
Mhm.
they score even a field goal, it's 10-3, or and of course, if they score a touchdown, it's 10-7, and it's a different game, and it's different dynamic, and maybe Michigan thinks differently, and instead it just all fizzled away.
Yeah, and you hate to see any of that have any type of impact on a game. I don't believe it changed the outcome of the game, but it could have changed how the game was played and the flow of the game. And as Scott said, how maybe Michigan called plays after that. So nothing they can do about that. Got to, I'm sure some video went to the league office last week, was sent in. So
Yeah.
um, I'm sure it was reviewed. Were you the one who asked Kirk about mid-season coaching changes? Was that you?
Yeah, I did.
He didn't seem to appreciate that question, but I thought it was a good one and a fair one, particularly with what we're seeing in the Big Ten West. It's not like you have to look far. I mean, we can say, you know, what Nebraska and Wisconsin have done or right or wrong, or,
Mhm.
coaches shouldn't lose their jobs or whatever. But it's kind of the way I look at this, Scott, is there's a lot of money involved here. We talked about the media rights deals. Um, it's about winning football games. It's a business. And if you're not winning enough, and the people that determine whether you're not winning enough oftentimes are the people that have the most money and are supporting your program. I think Kirk is in a really advantageous position that he's earned over the years and the equity that he's built up with boosters and the money people. And I'll say this, and you and I have talked about this off the air. Kirk is not getting fired, doesn't deserve to be fired at this point. They won the Big Ten West last year. And he's not going to fire Brian. So I know a lot of people are wasting energy on that. But that's not going to happen. And I kind of got that sense from his response to you, where he was a little agitated that and I can't see him ever firing somebody in the middle of the season.
Oh, I can't either. And I just thought I wanted to get him on the record about it,
Yeah.
because
And that was fair.
I knew the answer. But when you do look at, I think the two most like Iowa programs, in budget and style and what they're trying to go for is Nebraska and Minnesota. I mean, Iowa State and Minnesota or Nebraska and Wisconsin. Iowa State and Minnesota are not like Iowa in a lot of different ways, but those two are. And when you see those two programs that probably fit your program in comparable ways, making mid-season changes, I think it does. You just have to get that question out there. And so the fact that, hey, I'm not going to do it, I understand that. I figured he would. I just wanted to make sure he got on, his answer down. And you look at, should there be changes? That's I don't know what it would solve right now, honestly. I mean, the thought of I think I think Brian is a really skilled offensive line coach. I think he knows the running game very well. I think he's probably better suited to that. But I also have kind of seen some of the concepts the passing game has. And I think that, yeah, I can see some improvements there. It's just the personnel hasn't been able to manage it yet. And I think it's an execution or personnel issue more than it is other than the tendencies. I think it's really, that's kind of where it comes back to. It's just, what do there's such a groundswell of aggravation that just won't leave, that it makes it really difficult, and in some ways less enjoyable than this job has ever been.
Yeah.
Because you write something, I went through their tendencies the other day, and there's one commenter who said, I didn't even read the story, I just want to see Brian fired, that kind of thing. I'm like, well, you're not gonna read any story then. That's not gonna happen. Now, the only thing you could really hope for is at the end of the year, Brian decides, you know what, I've had enough. I'm going to go to the NFL, or Bill O'Brien's going to go take the Arizona State or Colorado job, and I'm going to go with him. That's really about it. He's not going to get fired. You can complain about nepotism all you want. You can complain about the offense all you want. They're not going to make changes. They're not going to fire Kirk Ferentz, crying out loud, because he did win 12 straight games going into the midpoint of last year. Now, they haven't had a lot of success since then. They're 6-5, I think, is probably the record right now over the last 11 games. So that's not real good, but still, this is a team that's, you just got to accept it for what it is.
And I think kind of the dynamic of this, and it's not breaking news, is this is kind of worst case scenario for Kirk when he hired Brian.
Yeah.
Is that the offense struggled this much over a length of time that there's a groundswell of make it stop. Mm-hmm. We can't watch this. It's an entertainment game. It's an entertainment sport. This is not entertaining to watch. And that gets people really riled up. And then Kirk's in a position, do I fire my son? How can I do that? It just makes it a really stressful situation for everybody on the inside and outside of the program. Brian can't be having fun. I don't think he's having fun with this. And I think we've been around this long enough to know that Kirk bears a lot of responsibility in this. He's involved in the offense. He's involved in quarterback decisions, all of those things. And Spencer Petras has been put in a tough spot. All of those things play into it. And I don't know if there's some guilt on Kirk's end that he's put Brian and Spencer in this position. But we've seen through the years the same complaints with quarterbacks and offensive coordinators, and the only constant is Kirk.
Right. Yeah, you're right. And that's where I kind of wish in his case, he would kind of graduate into being more of an overseer, or more of not a figurehead necessarily, but, really kind of remove himself from the day-to-day layout of the offense, because the game has changed too much. I mean, even looking at some of the numbers last few years, it wasn't so bad. In like 18 and 19, it was actually pretty good. The problem was when you compare those numbers to where they were national ranked in 2020 even, versus 2006 and 7, the yardage totals have almost gone up on average by like 80 to 100 yards per game. That's the way the game's going, and Kirk doesn't want to do it that way. And I think what you need to do is have somebody, if you can continue, if I was him, and let's say Brian decides to go, whether it's NFL to be a line coach or another college with like Bill O'Brien, if he gets a job, and he hires someone, I think if Kirk says, look, I want to keep the same type of blocking scheme. I think this is the way we want to do it. This is the way I want to do it and have it done. I want to still have tight ends being a central part of this offense, but the rest of it, you can decide. And I do want it to be a pass first quarterback, but but beyond that, do what you got to do. I think that would be the right strategy, because then you allow somebody to incorporate, okay, as long as we block this certain way most of the time, I can create new things. And I think that's the problem with when you're so stubborn and set to this, I mean, they're the worst offense in the country and trying to get to be less than the worst, trying to be, if they could be 100 by the end of the year, it shows great growth. And then I think the other aspects that are involved here is one, they completely whiffed in the 2018 and 19 classes, for tight end or for offensive line. None of them are starting. Only one of them is even rotating here, and that's Jack Plum. That's a big, big, big problem for their offensive line. That, and even last year, you had to go steal somebody from the defensive line to be your best lineman, and probably your second best lineman was a former walk-on and Kyler Schott. So, and then you look at wide receiver, all their losses there in the offseason, they didn't replace any of them. They didn't, and it's one thing to, we can argue about Petrus versus Zach Wilson or even Trey Lance to an extent or another quarterback. That happens. That's just part of the game. But I think the part where they deserve to be knocked down a notch or two is whiffing so badly on their offensive line recruiting and also not replenishing any part of their wide receiver core, because if they could have gotten 2 starters out of the 18 and 19 classes on the offensive line and 2 more contributors at wide receiver, I think this team at minimum is 4-1, and it looks a lot different.
Yeah, even if you have Jones and Tracy still on the roster, it's a lot different. And I
Mhm.
think also adding to the frustration, Scott, is I think people look at it and say, if this offense could just be average, this defense is so good, the special teams are so good that it almost feels like a missed opportunity.
Yeah, no question. Because, if this team goes, and I think the current trajectory is probably like 7-5. I just think that's the way it feels. Maybe 8-4 if they win a game that they probably shouldn't or something. But if you're thinking, man, if you had even a decent offense, one that, like 2020, the way they could run the ball, or, 2018 when you had Hawkinson and Fant, the way they could pass once in a while. If you had one of those types of offenses, then you feel like, you're still the team to beat in the West. Maybe you're not going to win it, the Big Ten, because that is really tough. And I think anybody who uses that as a litmus test for Kirk as being a great coach is stupid, because Ohio State has been so strong that it's almost impossible to win that game. But, overall, they just, that's what makes this Illinois game, why they're the underdog and why it's so important, rather than, okay, go over there and take care of business, you should win this game. It's that's the difference between having an average offense and having one that's ranked in the bottom of NCAA.
And you look at the Big Ten West, everybody but Wisconsin's 1-1. It's there for the taking if you can just get the offense to complement the defense and special teams. It's not doing that right now, and it's going to be tough to win this division with the schedule that lays ahead, not only this week, but then the bye and Ohio State, still road games at Purdue and Minnesota. Even those games at the end of the season against Wisconsin and Nebraska, you don't know what those teams are going to look like by that point in the season. So we're at the halfway point, Scott. The offense needs to click now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're halfway done through the season. Can you believe that? I mean,
I know.
The Saturday night, it goes so fast. And, but, like the first 2 weeks were like a mulligan, like almost like they don't count because of how bad their offense was. And now they're starting to try to turn it around, and they're, weeks behind everybody else. But it's time, and again, like you said, if they lose this week, and I don't think anybody expects them or will pick them to beat Ohio State except against the spread, then they're 3-4. And you got those road games, and then you've got games against, Northwestern. They've lost their last 3 at home to Northwestern. Yes, Northwestern isn't very good, but I'm sure they're not going, man, I don't know if we could beat Iowa in Iowa City, because they've done it every time any of these kids have been in college. Wisconsin at home, I mean, maybe they turn it around. And then finally Nebraska, would make their season if Iowa was like 5-6. And it's like, all right, we're going to go to Iowa City and win. They haven't done that, since 2014, and knock Iowa out of a bowl game. Yeah, I mean, that could be the ultimate. So That's why this game is so important, in my opinion, for Iowa to go 4-2, feel like, okay, you've gained some momentum, you've beaten a rival, a team you compete against for recruits a lot now, and then go to the bye feeling like, okay, we've made some progress. Let's go out and have a good second half.
Yeah, that's a big, I'm glad you brought that up. And we'll talk a little bit about recruiting here as we wrap up the football conversation. Scott, is Brett, when he took the job, said, I'm locking down the borders. Now, the top kids are going to go to Michigan, JJ McCarthy. You're going to lose the big guys to Ohio State, still Michigan, Notre Dame, schools like that. But he's done a really nice job of keeping kids in state, and that in turn hurts Iowa. Now, if Illinois in year 2 of his reign can beat Iowa on the field, that makes it that much more difficult for Iowa to recruit in Illinois, which has been a key spot for the Hawkeyes.
Yeah, they've been able to walk into Illinois and not take whoever they want, but be very competitive for whoever they want, and then grab players every single year.
The two starting defensive tackles are from Illinois.
Yeah, exactly. One right across the river, and one, in the Chicagoland area. And you look at some of the guys that they've lost, that running back, that big one that's from the Champaign area.
Yeah.
If Lovey was there, maybe they get him. Instead he's, and I think I look at him and I'm like, wow, that kid's going to be special. He's a big Braylon Allen type, and Aiden Lowry, he probably could have been helpful on the offensive side of the ball this year,
Yep.
kind of a, I don't want to go this far, but Cooper DeJean comes to mind, maybe he'd be something more like that. And, if you lose just one of those kids every year to Illinois, again, that could be the difference in a very close game between them making a play on third down and you not forcing a punt one way or the other, scoring, all those types of things. So that's why I think it's essential that Iowa gets this win, and it's a really important game. Biggest game of the season in my eyes.
Yep. It can completely change the outlook and complexion of where things go from here. We'll get to recruiting here in a minute. I wanted to let folks know that support for the podcast comes from Systems Unlimited, celebrating 50 years of providing services to people living with disabilities and mental health needs throughout East Central Iowa. A list of their services and upcoming events can be found at sui.org. Thank you to Systems Unlimited. We're going to hear from a few more of our sponsors right now. And on the other side of the break, Scott and I will dive into a little bit of recruiting and then do some basketball and then our picks. So please come back. And thank you again to our sponsors. We are back to hit a little recruiting. Scott, big group of kids that as you would expect for the Michigan game last week, and Iowa handed out some important scholarship offers, one being in the 2023 class at a position that we talked about of need, and that's Ryan Mooney, a tall 6'3"-ish, quick, emerging. They call them pop-up prospects. He's a senior that's kind of put things together. He's from Orchard Park, Michigan, visited here this last weekend and got a Boston College offer. He's starting to kind of put things together this season. More interest is coming his way. Iowa was able to get him on campus, gave him an offer. And this is the type of kid you have to close on. And it'll be interesting to see what other competition will come in here to compete against Iowa. But the sooner Iowa maybe closes this one, the better.
Yeah, for sure. It's a big one. I think he's listed 6'3" or 6'4", 170. What, a lacrosse guy. I think that's really important. He's from an important part of their recruiting territory in Michigan. And as the Big Ten West kind of dissipates here, if not this year, certainly next year will be the last time. That's going to go back to being prime recruiting territory. You're not playing there every 3 years or every 6 years, depending on which Michigan school. You're going to be playing there very frequently. And so I think you want to make sure you get those prospects in as often as you can. And I think in this case, he's still really under the radar, which is a good thing for Iowa. And I know other schools will probably start to talk to him. And then when you get closer to signing day, then you're going to see probably others really start to dig. And but he seems to fit the prototype, and they need taller guys. They need X receivers who can do something with the ball and beat one-on-one coverage. And right now, I think he'd be a good one to bet on.
Yeah, bye week next week. Expect Iowa to get on the road and get a face in person to watch him play and show, the kid that they want him. I'm sure they're telling him that, but getting a coach out there or two coaches to close the deal there would be important. Talk about a pop-up prospect, Scott. Grant Bricks from Logan Magnolia in state here. He's a 2024 offensive lineman. 8 Power 5 offers since September 18th. Just Iowa State, Missouri, Minnesota, Kansas, Oklahoma, Wisconsin, and Nebraska. And Iowa offered him this past weekend on his visit. Iowa's done well in-state offensive line-wise, and now this kid becomes important. But unlike some of the kids, like a Cody Fox, where Iowa was in early and just closed the deal, they've got competition for this kid.
Yeah, I mean, being late to the party, really, when everybody else around you has already offered him, that kind of adds to the issues. Now, I don't know if he's, I haven't seen him up close and in person. I think I missed him the other day, but to have all those offers, have Iowa State already offer him before then, and the Kansas schools, which are very active in the state, Minnesota is as well, and then Oklahoma and Nebraska, to me, is like, that you could really, especially with Oklahoma, when they come up to Iowa for something like this, that tells you a lot. Now, he looks like he's got a great starter kit, 6'6", 265. Doesn't look like he's, he looks like he can put on weight and not miss the thing, So, but now they're in a fight for him, and whereas if they would have offered him 6 months ago or a year ago, certainly he might already be off the market.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see how much Iowa ramps things up with Bricks to try to gain some ground from where they were. Just kind of jumping in here late, but it's still early. Those kids are only juniors in high school, so plenty of time there. Another junior who visited here in July and came back this past weekend, Styles Prescott from Indiana, got an offer this past weekend as well, and he's been building a good relationship with George Barnett. We talked about it, Scott. This is an important time for Iowa. It misfired 18, 19 at the end of last decade. It's important now to not have as many misses. And these kids they're identifying now, new, different offensive line coach. These are the kids you got to hit. You got to hit these kids and get back to having a consistent offensive line to where you're not having to play so many inexperienced guys early in the process, and you have time to develop guys.
No question. And yeah, he's a big, guy. He's also got some good offers already. He's from Indiana as opposed to, being from Iowa like Bricks. And, when you see him, that he's visited places like Purdue and Notre Dame and Cincinnati, which will be in the Big 12 next year. There's just a lot of, elements now in play, but you want to compete. He's a 24 kid, so you got time, and he's already been on campus a couple of times, so that's a good thing. He's on the campus obviously last week and then during the summer, so I think that speaks well for Iowa. But as you said, when you're in this position where you got 3 sophomores, a freshman, and a junior, in your starting lineup, and then you have the rotational guys are 2 freshmen or freshman and sophomore. It means you'll be pretty good in a couple of years, but it also means right now that this is the position that they're in, and they need to make sure that they don't go through that again. As you said, some of the unfortunate parts are the injuries, guys like Cody Ince and Justin Britt not being able to play. I mean, if you would have them on the offensive line, then you'd feel pretty good. Like if your offensive line consisted of, and it wouldn't matter positions, but if it's, Cody Ince, Justin Britt, Connor Colby, Mason Richmond, and then, whether it's Logan Jones or Tyler Ellsbury or whoever at center, I feel like you'd probably be like, okay, well, they're not in bad shape. But but you've got to make sure you replace the injured guys, and this might be one. And then looking last week and seeing Caden Proctor on the sidelines, it was like, yeah, you could probably go out there and help this team right now.
Yeah, no question. And as you're saying, there's nothing you can do about the position you're in right now. The guys are learning on the job, and you hope that pays off next year and the year after that. But you would rather not have to put guys like Jennings Dunker and Bo Stevens and guys like that into the action this early. And if you can recruit well behind these guys now, then you don't need to do that moving forward, and you're not in this position again.
Yeah, because the perfect world for Iowa is you can have 2 or 3 veterans up front who are pretty good to keep their positions, and then maybe have a young player who you think is going to be really good in a few years, and then maybe rotating another one. They've done that forever. Brandon Sheriff rotated at guard. Austin Blythe rotated at guard. Sean Welsh,
James Daniels.
James Daniels. They just figured they need to go out there and get them some snaps, and then because in another year or two they're going to be a really important piece, and that's the way you want to play. If you can have 6 guys, and one plays two series and another one comes in for one, and you're looking at a 70-play game or 65-play game probably. One guy plays 42 and the other one plays 23. I think that's ideal, perfect world. But as you said, and that's the world you want to live in for Bo Stevens or Tyler Ellsbury or somebody like that. You don't want to live in the just throw them out there and see who's playing better today. That's why things get tough.
And we're not talking about the unicorns like Wirfs and Proctor.
No,
those guys are a different breed.
Yeah. I mean, Linderbaum, who flipped over, but you think about how almost seamless it looked when he flipped over. I mean, he stepped right in, and you really didn't notice him making any mistakes right away. And Logan Jones is improving. And I asked him about that block, that he got called for the unnecessary roughness. I said, "What did it said to you?" And it's basically like, don't change a thing, just do what you do. And that's really all you can do. But it's been a little more difficult, climb. And maybe that's because, now, granted, when Linderbaum went in, that's when they had some guard trouble, but he still had Wirfs and Alaric Jackson, and they were really good players.
No question. We'll keep an eye on the recruiting. It's important time here. It'll be important next week when Iowa has the bye week. They'll have the coaches out on the road, checking kids out. We'll get a little bit of indication of which guys they are high on the recruiting board, so to speak. But transition now into some basketball talk. Believe it or not, it was Iowa men's basketball media day yesterday, Wednesday, October the 5th. And it's good to see those guys. I enjoy it, Scott. I'm not in a basketball mode. I'll admit that right now, but it's good to diversify a little bit and talk a little bit about this season. I think this is an interesting team. You lose, a generational type talent in Keegan Murray moving on and is about to take the NBA by storm. And we're going to hear a lot about him this winter. You lose a guy who was here for 15 years in Jordan Bohannon. At least it seemed like 15 years,
right.
But those are 2 huge pieces that you have to replace. But as a few guys said yesterday, the year before you were replacing, Luka Garza and Joe Wieskamp, not to mention CJ Frederick and Jack Nungy, and Iowa came through that okay. I don't think there's a Keegan Murray on this roster. There is his twin brother, who I think is a really good player, just a different type of player. But I think if you look at it, what you're hoping for here, and we talked about it on the football side in terms of developing guys and guys getting better as their careers go on, you got to hope that from Patrick. You got to hope that from Rabracha, Tony Perkins. There are a lot of guys on this team that I think can take a step forward.
Yeah, you're right. And I think, losing Keegan, as you said, he's a generational guy, just like Luka Garza was, and Wieskamp to an extent was as well. And those are, you just don't replace them. And Iowa seemingly had one of those players almost every year since, Fran's been there, from Devin Marble to Aaron White, Jared Utoff and Peter Jock and Tyler Cook, and the list goes on and on. They've had a really high level professional basketball player, and Keegan Murray is probably the best of the bunch, certainly at the NBA level. But I do like the guts of this roster. I think they're able to compensate in certain areas for Keegan to an extent, and for Jordan. And when you look at one sophomore, I kind of talked to him, and I tried to approach this question in a weird way, but I'm like, Peyton Sandford, he had a similar role last year to what Keegan Murray did as a freshman. Not to compare the same type of jump. That's just impossible. There's no way he's going to, if he does, then I'll be blown away. But his impact could be greater. I mean, he averaged, 10 and a half minutes, 5 points a game. I would expect those numbers could probably double for him, that he could probably average close to 10 points in 20 minutes a game. Tony Perkins, I think, really took off. He really became that. I just look at him on the court and I just think a dog, a tough dude. He's going to get his buckets. He's not going to play around with anybody. And I really like, Patrick McCaffrey's game. He's the leading scorer returning. He averaged 24 minutes last year, 10 and a half points. I think he's going to be a guy that is going to, be able to take another step forward. And Chris Murray too. Now that the offense he's going to be a more focal point of this offense, he's going to get a chance to shine. So I like the guts of this roster. It's going to take some time to completely build it and what it's going to be. But last year, I thought they would take a major step back. And in fact, you can make a case that they were an even better team last year towards the end of the year, especially winning the Big Ten tournament, than they were the year before when they were number 2 seed in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, and I wouldn't expect to have, and you shouldn't expect to have somebody like Keegan who's going to average, upwards of, 20, what he averaged, 22, 23 points a game last year?
23 and a half, yeah.
Yeah, so I think you're going to have a situation where, as you said, Scott, you could have Patrick, Chris, Tony, Sanford. They're legitimate double-figure scorers. You could have 4 guys right there that could beat you on any given night, depending on matchups. Maybe one one night it's Chris having the most points, another night it's Patrick, maybe Tony, maybe Peyton. I think I was pretty good at point guard. Point guards are pretty good hands with the combo they have of Ulis, and I've heard nothing but good things about Desante Bowen. And if you talk to the kid, he's got it. He understands, he gets it. So he'll have his growing pains as a freshman at point guard in this league. But I think he's going to be a key contributor this year. And then hopefully Josh Dix gets his feet back under him literally, and maybe can be, what Peyton Sandford was last year.
Yeah, right. It's, to me, I think it comes down to 2 key positions in how if Iowa goes from being a quality NCAA tournament team to one that's competing at the top of the Big Ten. And I think it's point guard, as you mentioned. It's because Bohannon had to move back there last year. They just were unsettled. Joe Toussaint transferred, and it just wasn't consistent enough. And then the other one, and so can Ulis and Bowen kind of man that point? Can if they need to, they can always have Connor McCaffrey bring up the ball for his 6th year, and it feels like the same type of scenario as Bohannon.
Yeah,
been there forever, or even Tony Perkins, because a lot of cases it's just bringing up the ball anyway. But to me, the one that really they've got to be prepared for is the post. And they weren't able to get anybody out of the transfer portal. You know what? NIL, it matters more in men's basketball than any other sport. But can Rebraca can he take steps forward to be a quality post when they're playing big posts? Not just, in most games, it's not going to matter. I don't think. I think it's just another rebounder. But when they're playing Purdue or Michigan, can he go in there and bang and do that? Can Riley Mulvey become a contributor? Can Josh Agudale, who went to the portal and came back, can he provide quality minutes? He looks slimmer. He looks like he's, in better shape. And but they're going to need him. He's good at times. It seems like against Purdue, he's always good. And that's an important team to play against. So if they can get something positive out of the post on a consistent basis, and if their point guard can really do a good job for this team, yeah, I think they could be a top 3 team in the Big Ten this year.
Yeah, and like you said, Scott, it's not going to be. I don't think it's going to be one guy. I don't think Eulis or Bowen's going to run away with the point guard position, and probably not that situation in the post either. It's going to be a combination of guys, and I think you can, if you're Big Ten play is when that post play is going to be most important, and if you can maybe push Rebracha to the 4 spot, which I think is his natural spot, and have Mulvey and Gundele suck up at least half the minutes, if not, 25 at the center position, that makes you that much more flexible, versatile to be able to match up with whatever's being thrown your way.
No question. And if they can do that, then they're in a really, really good spot. Because yeah, I think if in a perfect world, you in Iowa's offense, I mean, Luka Garza aside, they're not really built to have a center-based offense anyway. That's not what they do. But when you have Luka Garza, you feed Luka Garza.
Right.
But I would like to see, like, Rocco to me would be a great sixth man, because he's versatile. He can play the 4, he can play the 5, and come in on the games and impact them. I think that would be his perfect role. But you got to have somebody, a Ryan Creener would be perfect for this team right now. And any of those 3 guys get to that level, Mulvey, can he make those strides? Gundele, I wondered, I don't know, did you get a chance to talk to him? I was just wondering about his flirtation with the transfer portal, and and how his conversation with Fran went when he decided, or they decided to bring him back. And that had to be very interesting.
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to talk to him yesterday. That was one of the misses I had. I just didn't have enough time. We're limited with the amount of time, and I got to everybody pretty much besides him and a couple of other guys. But I think we could probably take at face value that if Iowa would have gotten one of those other big men, I'm not sure Josh would be back here. But Josh needs to look at this opportunity as almost a second chance and not squander it.
Yeah.
And there were times last year, I think, where he wasn't all in and kind of let his conditioning, that's kind of been one of the challenges for him, is conditioning since he's gotten here. And he talked about it with me during recruiting, that was something that he needed to tackle, that he needed to overcome, is letting himself get out of shape. Like you said, he looks good again, but he looked good at the beginning of last year when last year started, and then he let himself go during the season. He can't do that again. This team, it's an opportunity that he can't squander again, because I think it's probably his last one.
For sure. And he's, and I'm sure you're right. If they would have gotten the kid from Louisiana who went to Ole Miss, I think they'd probably be, saying sayonara to Josh Gundele, or bringing him back, and we'll bring it back, but there's really nothing here for you. And now he does have that chance, and he's got to make good on it, because they need him. They really do. And because even last year, you could move some guys around, and even Keegan could play in the post if they needed him to, and he did sometimes. But, and it's not necessarily, it's not a rigid offense where they need the 5 every single time, but it's mainly, it's like Fran said yesterday, it's more about rebounding than anything. It's not a body up and be physical in there. I mean, Adam Woodbury was really good in that role. Very, very good. Underrated in that role. Not really a scorer. They don't need a score necessarily. And I think Rebraca, this is his, he's now a 5th or 6th year guy. I think now is his chance to also kind of assert himself in that role, but play it in a way that is advantageous to him and his development.
Yeah, should be an interesting season. A lot of change in the Big Ten. Big Ten lost a lot of players. If you look at the NBA draft, a lot of the star power is gone. So as we've seen in the past, new guys step in and take on those roles in the league, and we'll see if Iowa can have a few of those guys. Scott, you wrote about a little bit different angle from Media Day yesterday. You talked to Connor and Patrick, who have grown up literally in and around this program, and asked them for their starting 5 players from their dad's tenure here, which believe it or not, is going into year 13. And so Tom Davis went 13 years, right?
Yeah, isn't that crazy when you think about it? That
Yeah.
that Fran is year 13, and some people think of him as just kind of he's still the young one, but frankly, it's just because the other ones have been around for so long. I mean,
Yeah.
God, Brands is what going into year 17, I think it is, 16 or 17, and for parents, of course, 24. Lisa Bluter 20 plus. I mean, it's like he feels like he's just started, but you're 13. That's a lot, and of course, for their lifespan, it's a huge part of their life. Both of them were really interesting. Connor was like, is this position based? And when because he started to go, well, and he went four really quick. Devin at the one, Devin Marble, Whitey, Keegan, and Luca at 3, 4, 5. And then he started hemming and hawing over the two guard or whatever, and between Jock and Jared Utoff. And he went with Jock. Patrick was more decisive because he actually said he was talking about this the other day, and he went with Marble, Utoff, Keegan, Aaron White, and of course Luca Garza. But then Connor started going, well, but I love Sapp. I love the way he played defense. And TC, Tyler Cook, he'd be really tough, So
East Camp.
yeah, I know I was kind of surprised he didn't get brought up, but he didn't. So I don't know. I kind of went through my own teams and I thought, what would I do? And
I think
there's
some of it would be based on if you have to stay to a rigid position,
yeah,
or if you just take your best 5.
right. Because my best, if I was to go position, and then this might even be best 5 to that matter, I would probably go with Marble, Jock. I'd probably do what Connor did: Marble, Jock, Murray, Whitey, and Garza. But I'd feel like, Wieskamp, that's a tough one to leave out. Utah, that's a tough one to leave out. Those are probably I'd say Utah would be my first alternate and Wieskamp my second alternate. And then there are others, I thought Woodbury was really good as a post defender and passer, not as much as a scorer, but again, if you got a scoring offense, you don't need that. I thought Matt Gatens towards the end of his year, he played with a really rough roster, so I don't think we got to see him in his full capabilities. Tyler Cook, of course, and the guy I like, he wouldn't mention his own name, is Connor, as a guts and glue kind of guy that really helps out in a roster. And then a couple others that got overshadowed. I think Gable Lashani, Melson Desabi, Eric May was a good captain early in his career. Mike Gazelle was a nice point guard. Bryce Cartwright did a nice job his first year. So there's a lot of really good players, but I think that first 6 or 7 are, it's tough once you get past 4, because it just seems like there's 4 at the top. And then after that, it's like, oh, okay, which first team all Big Ten guy do you leave out?
Yeah, and I think if after this season, maybe Chris enters the conversation.
Yeah, good. Very well, good. I mean, if he takes a similar jump, he said he doesn't think he'll be like a 23-point guy. He said he might be like a 15 to 20 guy, which you'll take that in a heartbeat. Yeah. And he's like, because he's also more of a facilitator than his brother. And, which kind of means that, to me, Keegan is probably best served as like a 4, and he's best served as a 3. So yeah, you would take that either way.
Yeah, and if anything, this conversation, I think, illustrates that there have been some really good basketball players here the last 12 years.
Yeah, I know. And, the thing I also asked them was their favorite memories or moments before losing, before they became players. And then after, of course, after, it's easy, the Big Ten tournament last year, but beforehand. And Connor and Patrick both were more in the line of just watching the program grow, that what it was like when they got here, and being so outgunned, and outmanned every single game of those early years. But then you think of the moments, like the ones against, like Patrick brought up the Dayton game in the NIT in 2012, which was just seismic, because remember, that was the one where it was sold out and nobody had their normal seats. So it was just a raucous environment from tip to the close. And then, you know, Connor, or in particular, was just watching this team grow and winning games. You know, and one line he says, I don't want to say some people take it for granted, but we're beating high level teams, high level talent on a consistent basis. When we got here, that wasn't the case. And I think that's right. And I think that's kind of the way football and basketball are right now in this program, that, you know, they're not taking the biggest step, but they're very, very good, and they beat good teams consistently. And there's some people that appreciate it, and there's some people who think that it should just be part of the gig. And that's a disconnect that I don't think you'll ever really align with Iowa fans.
No, and I mean, I understand there's that envy of, you know, why can't we be a championship level team? But you also need to look at the opposite of that. What, you know, you're lucky you're not back to way this thing was, you know, in the 70s for football, or when Licklider was here.
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
it's certainly not that far. It doesn't take a lot to get back to the toilet.
Yeah, right. Well, you look at football now. At some point, Nebraska will get off the mat, or you could be Nebraska. You fire Kirk the way
Yeah.
they did Frank Solich, and then think that you've got somebody in mind, and that person isn't very good, or you think, oh, it's a home run hire and Scott Frost, and he's the worst one you've ever hired. That's 20 years of wandering in the desert, just kind of like Iowa did between Ebby and Hayden. And, you know, now I also understand that you can't be so risk averse that you don't take an opportunity when it's there. But, you know, it was only a year ago Iowa was ranked second in the country and had won 12 straight games from dating to the year before, and still won its division title. And you know, but I also understand and agree with, you should expect more from production from the offense, that this just can't be this bad. Likewise with Fran, you know, he hasn't gotten the team to the Sweet 16, and that's something that people will look at and have talk.
And ironically, the narrative there is defense, whereas
Exactly.
it's the opposite for football.
I tweeted that out yesterday for Hop. I took a picture of Fran. I said, you know, here's a team that's led the Big Ten in offense the last 4 years. And somebody, you know, people kind of took that, kind of laughed, I think, but also, man, if we could have Fran as our offensive coordinator and Phil as our defensive specialist in basketball, what a team we would have.
I was talking to Tony Perkins yesterday, and he was talking about his football career. And I was like, well, what type of quarterback were you? And he said, Lamar Jackson. He said, I like to think Lamar Jackson. And he goes, I watch our team sometimes talking about Iowa football. And he goes, I think about what I could do out there. And it just was funny.
Yeah. Patrick was talking about that too, that he's like, you know, Tony thinks that he could play quarterback, receiver, safety. He thinks he'd be great at all those positions. And,
Tony does not lack for confidence.
No. And I kind of think that he'd probably get a rude awakening.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt.
Yeah. So that'd be kind of funny though. So.
Well, let's hop back into football, Scott. We'll wrap up the pod with our weekly picks segment. And this week, same as the weeks before, you're better than me. And I'm just I pick games with Pat and Dallas at Hawk Fanatic. We pick those. I'm actually, those guys should be ashamed of themselves for letting me beat them so far in picks. I'm also in the Bet Rivers contest, dead last in that. And I also trail you. So that disclaimer, whatever I'm about to pick, don't pick it. Go the other way.
Yeah. Well, last week we were pretty close. We had one different pick, and I got that one right. I picked Northwestern, my plus 26.5, and you picked Penn State. Do you want to say our overall record, or
yeah, go ahead. Throw it out there. You need to at least let the people out there know, again, to run away from my picks.
I'm 34, 19 and 1. You're 25, 28 and 1. And I don't know.
Are you betting your money on these? So you should actually be gambling on these.
Not allowed to, Rob.
Okay.
That's the unfortunate part. Maybe I should do basketball, but of course I'd be much worse there. But
I did win the basketball Bet Rivers contest, the March Madness. So I'll hang my hat on that. I'm waiting for basketball season.
So, uh, yeah, we had to sign a document and everything when we went to the New York Times. So,
Ah,
but anyway, there's a Friday night game. Nebraska -3 at Rutgers. This week, Mark Whipple's talking about Big Ten title and Big Ten West title anyway. After winning their first game in a year against a Power Five team, so Nebraska, as always, does not lack for confidence. Rutgers is a tough physical team. We saw them there, last couple weeks ago, and they could have Noah Vedral back. That would be interesting, playing against his old team. That said, I'm going to go with Nebraska -3. I think they have more talent. I think they have more potential to beat Rutgers, even though it's on the road at Piscataway at night.
they have a red out.
Well, they probably not for Nebraska.
That's what I'm saying. That would be hilarious.
Yeah, maybe a blackout or something. But no, they had a scarlet out from the Hawkeyes, and
Yeah.
it was a pretty good atmosphere. I'm not going to ding them for it. I thought it went well. I thought like Piscataway is a different environment than what I think people think of it. I looked at it as kind of a different version of Madison. Maybe it was the red, but I like the bar scene there. It's just the only difference is it's really tough to get from New Brunswick to Piscataway, and I think if there's anything, New Brunswick felt like more of a college town, and Piscataway's, at least that area is kind of out on its own. But anyway, I don't know. Greg Schiano, the one thing I've learned about him is that team's going to fight you if nothing else, and that's a big plus from where they were not that long ago.
Yeah, Whipple's a little out there. I think he's channeling Scott Frost in his absence.
Yeah, right.
It seemed like that this week. But yeah, this is an interesting game, Scott. I think Rutgers is with Schiano is disciplined. Talent level probably isn't there that he wants yet. The offense does not look good consistently. Nebraska has a bunch of talent, explosive offense when it's going well, but undisciplined. Will hurt itself on occasion. So that's what makes this one a tough one to pick. But when I'm down, I got to take some chances, and I'm going with the home team here, and I'm going to predict that Nebraska is at this game and does stupid stuff to shoot itself in the foot.
Man, it would be kind of funny because they actually played pretty well, I thought, against Indiana. Other than the Chuba Purdy, whatever that was, fumble. It was kind of Jonathan Parker type at the Hawk Slayer Bowl. Except it was in the end zone.
Yep.
That was ridiculous. But Michigan at Indiana, Indiana is getting 22.5 against the Wolverines. What do you think about this?
On the road for a second week in a row. I'm throwing the points. Indiana's just not a very good team. I'm really still not sure how it beat Illinois. Illinois killed itself in that game. Michigan is far superior here. So I'm going with that. Could be a letdown. Indiana's played Michigan tough in the past, but I'm going to go with who I think is the superior team here, even though it's a heck of a lot of points.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Michigan as well. I think this is tough because, again, it's like, well, what do you kind of imagine the score being? And if I told you 31-10, I would probably take the over for Michigan. It's probably more in the 34-10 or 41-10 type of scenario. Michigan is what really impressed me about Michigan was their ability just to channel on what they need to do and do it well. There were no turnovers. There were no stupid plays. There were no, oh my God, I can't believe they did that. Indiana has shown that it did that, certainly in Nebraska. It's at home, but that doesn't matter for Indiana. It's not basketball. So yeah, I'm taking Michigan as well. Throwing the 22.5, that's a large number, as you said. But what Michigan did at Iowa translates over into different places. This isn't just they went 37 for 40 through the air for 450 yards and 6 touchdowns. If you can run the ball in Iowa City, you can run the ball anywhere. And I think they'll do that all day long at Indiana on another Big Ten network or Big noon kickoff. And then they got another one after that with it in Penn State. So it's just going to be kind of the Michigan big noon kickoff the way the season's going. Here's maybe the most fascinating game to me. Wisconsin minus 9.5 at Northwestern. And I'm going to go Wildcats again. I think Wisconsin's beat Northwestern in Evanston twice in the last 20 years. And the turmoil that they've experienced, I did not see a good football team last Saturday. And I'm not convinced they magically can become a good football team just with the changing of the guard. And Northwestern, long grass, they can play every now and then. They have a pretty good running game. Saw what they were able to do with Nebraska. Last week, they only lost by 10 at Unhappy Valley. So I think that I'm not saying they win, but I think they cover.
What's the number?
9.5 for Wisconsin.
Yeah, I'll take Northwestern. I think it's a touchdown game probably for Wisconsin, and it's one that will not be aesthetically pleasing if you're watching it.
Yeah, if you're watching it. The only reason why you watch it is they're in the same division and
right,
they're kind of rivals. So I think you just go, well,
or you have money on the game.
Yeah, right. That's it. but there'll be other games that'll be more entertaining, certainly. But then speaking of which, one that will be for sure, and probably an underrated game of the week. Purdue at Maryland.
Yeah, this one
-3.
This one could be fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this could be a high scoring game, and I'm here for it. After watching the Iowa team and then the Bears on Sunday, which just adds to the chaos. I'm going to go with Purdue. Give me 3 in Purdue. I think Purdue's got the chance to now, it kind of can shape its destiny. It played well, I thought, against Minnesota last week. So I'm going to take the Boilers.
Purdue found a running game, which is scary. This is a tough one. So Purdue is getting 3 points.
Yeah, Maryland's a 3-point favorite.
I'll take the 3.
Okay.
I will definitely take the 3. I think this is going to be one of those, whoever scores last is going to win. It's going to be, what's the total? You probably don't have it in front of you. I would wonder what the total is in this game.
I'll look it up here really quick.
Because I mean, Maryland scored 27 on Michigan. So,
right.
Definitely an explosive offense. 2 of the better quarterbacks in the league too in this game, I think.
Yeah, great receivers.
Yep.
Of course, an Iowa refugee, and scrolling here, I'm trying to find it. Maybe I missed. Oh, there it is. Go with consensus here. Sorry for the delay.
No, you're good.
Yeah. Now there.
64.
64. So yeah, that's pretty high scoring.
Did I get it?
Oh no! Oh, I thought that's what you.
No, that was my guess.
It's 58.5. It opened at 61.5, so 58.5. So I could see this one being like in the last minute of the game, it's 38-34 or even 48-44. Maryland and Purdue have a chance to take the lead or lose, and it could be a betting win or loss too at the same time. So great receivers. Purdue's got some good ones. Obviously, Maryland it does as well. Dante Demas and Rakim Jarrett and Tagovailoa and Aiden O'Connell could be really good in this game. So, and I think Purdue's defense is a little bit better, but
it's a big one for Purdue. If Purdue can get this one, it's going to have a big leg up, I think, in the division.
Yeah, for sure. Because there's not a team in the division that they can't beat. Based on style, and the part of that is, and this is the problem I have with Iowa and its style of play is one play can get you beat when you have a team like that, or they're built to where they can come back and get you. There aren't any other teams. Nebraska probably could if it stays disciplined enough, but the rest of them aren't built that way. The Buckeyes minus 25.5 at Michigan State. And Michigan State clearly is the most disappointing team in the league this year.
That's a big number. I'm going to take the 25.5.
Okay.
Just because this is somewhat of a rivalry game. This is a complete dart throw that Michigan State gets a late score here to be able to keep it within 25.5.
Yeah, the over under is 65. So they expect and actually oh my God, the current I read a wrong number. It's 27.5. I don't think that changes you.
No, I'll take the extra 2.
Yeah.
4 touchdowns basically.
Yeah. I've been waiting for Ohio State to kind of back off, lay an egg a little bit, and it did a little bit last week, but I think Rutgers is better than even Michigan State right now.
Agree.
That's great. That's crazy, but it's true. I'm going to go with the Buckeyes. I think they're out to make a statement that they are deserving of moving up in the polls, and they've been unfairly discriminated against because they are a Big Ten team. So I'm going to go with the Ohio State University. Now, ours, the game that we'll be at in Champaign.
This line's moved quite a bit throughout the week, hasn't it?
Well, it opened at 3.5. It's still 3.5.
Okay.
Total's moved up 1, but so yeah, the Illinois is favored 3.5 at home. They're expecting, the pumpkin Belima, the big orange to come out and roll an Iowa team that hasn't shown much punch on offense, but both of them are pretty good defensively, statistically goes. I'm going to go Iowa. And part of it is the emotion of the moment can get to some teams. I'm not saying that, and I'm saying that I think Illinois, the moment may be too big for them right now. And they're playing against a team that won't play to their level, that understands its importance and its place in the world. I saw enough life in Iowa last week to think that Iowa has a chance to do some decent things offensively and to shut down Illinois. And then what's going to happen when they have to press? Because, this might be the first decent team that they've played all year. I don't think Wisconsin's in that ballpark. Not now. Maybe they will be later. And I think Iowa has a strategy and a system that travels. So I'm going to give the Hawkeyes a bump here going towards the end of the line.
I agree. And I especially like that hook. The 3.5, that half-point hook is nice there. And because I think it's probably a field goal game one way or the other. And if either team's going to run away from the other, I think it will be Iowa. I really like what you talked about earlier, Scott, and I hopefully that Iowa employs this strategy to continue to get the ball to the tight ends. I think those are 2 of your best weapons on offense. And I think if you can catch Illinois in some run blitzes and get the ball to those playmaking tight ends, that could be very advantageous. And then I think in conjunction with that opens up the running game for Williams and Johnson. The Williamses and Johnson. Yeah. Seems like we hadn't talked about this. It seems like maybe LaShawn and Caleb are the 1-2 punch here, and Gavin is kind of sprinkled in here or there. It seems like that may be the case, and there's nothing wrong with that. And it's nice to have 3 guys that are capable because it's a position that absorbs a lot of contact and guys get dinged up. So it's nice to know that you have 3 capable guys in your backfield.
For sure. And Gavin has been dinged up and, he didn't have a lot of snaps last week, but I would also say that based on performance that I've seen, that the 2 best performing running backs are LaShawn Williams and Caleb Johnson right now. And I think that they've, that's, to me, you got to run with that. And, I do think the tight ends are very important. I think also I can see this setting up a lot like the Rutgers game where this is their emotions all in. And as we know, Iowa takes a lot of emotion out of the game for a lot of teams. And this is being one of them, that you stop them, you force them to punt, maybe you score, there's a defensive score, and then they start to press because they haven't been in this situation before. And that could be, they had a big emotional win and everybody loves them right now. Hey, look at Illinois. And that's tough to go through. If this was basketball, it'd be a different animal because, Illinois is in that Bermuda Triangle, with Purdue and Indiana where basketball's first. And, but I just, and this is kind of a rivalry game that doesn't have a trophy, although I still believe that a black and orange traffic cone is the perfect one for this game. If you're to have a traveling trophy, just whoever grabs one off I-74 on the way to the stadium, and that's the one you get. But
a 1-lane road.
Yeah, exactly.
And we'll end on this, guys. Iowa's football games are sold out this year, so you have to buy tickets on the secondary market. There are tickets remaining for this game, especially if you're in Eastern Iowa, Western Illinois, even in Central Iowa. It's a pretty easy trip to get there. And Iowa fans have traveled, at least, in recent years, pretty well to this game. So might not be weather's supposed to be a little crisp, but this might not be a bad idea to get on the road and catch Iowa and support the Hawkeyes on the road.
Yeah, it's perfect football weather. It'll be probably in the low 40s, maybe even high 30s, but at least there won't be rain. So yeah, it's fall football weather, and you know what they're selling a 4-pack now for $109. I'm like, shoot, but Iowa would be one for $109, for some of these games, and so yeah, you got an opportunity here to watch your team, and the Chicagoland area as well. I mean, it's just zoom, downstate a little bit.
St.
And
Louis,
St. Louis, yeah, Indy,
Yep.
whatever. So I do think this is going to be a really interesting matchup, because I think if Bielema continues to build this program, and I expect him to build it, do at least a competitive program, that this is a series that will be very important to both programs for the things we talked about with recruiting, but they're neighbors. There's never been a lot of love for these teams for one another. Iowa has owned this series, other than that accidental, loss in 2008, Iowa field goal. But that was a year after Illinois went to the Rose Bowl, and Iowa beat them that year. So I think this sets the stage up for what could be a very important and competitive series for a lot of years.
Yeah, my recommendation would be for Hawkeye fans, a bunch of you to show up wearing orange, and then rip the orange shirts off and have gold underneath.
Yeah, right. Remember the old Orange Crush, invasions, and the one of the moments that stands out of, dare I say, the Licklider era, or error, if you want to be more accurate, was
ERA.
Yeah, ERROR.
Yep, either one works.
Yeah, was when they played Illinois, and about 300 students got tickets underneath one of the baskets, and they got it through a donor, because normally they would split them up. Then they ripped all those things off right under the basket, and my phone was pinging from old dudes like us remember a lot of the wars of the 80s and 90s between these two teams on the basketball court, which I think right now we're in kind of a similar era for that. When you had Marble against Kendall Gill, and the Flying Illini, and all the way up through the Andy Kaufman shot 94 or maybe 93, I'm sorry. That they had all that stuff. I think this case, it's going to be, I think you're going to see an inspired Illini crowd. So the important thing for Iowa is take them out of it.
Yeah, I look forward to this one. It's very intriguing. I don't really have a strong feeling either way on who's going to win this. Wouldn't surprise me if either team won. And those are the kind of games that are fun to go into and just kind of see which team can establish itself and impose its will on the other. And look forward to this one. I will see you down in Champaign, Scott. Thank you, everybody, for listening to the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast. Thanks to all of our sponsors for supporting the podcast. Scott and I will be back to talk to you next week on the bye week. Maybe we'll come up with some fun mid-season topics. We'll review this game and then look out to the second half of the season. Enjoy the games this weekend, everybody, and we will talk to you next week. Say goodbye, Scott.
Goodbye, Scott.